Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bas Asher. Friends of Nina Moynester, Nachama Asna Bas Yitzchak Aaron. Friends of Stephen Vigder, Simcha Melech Ben Meir Lev Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece Leah Bracha. Lydia, we did that a million times already. David and Mindel Cheslow, memory of his father, Moshe ben Reuben Mordechai. Susan and Reuben Podolsky, in memory of her father, Simcha Bunin ben Yeshua, and her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Dov. Haran and Mel Haller, in memory of her father, Yosef Eliezer ben Tzvi Hirsch. B. Pizer, in memory of her father, Yisachar Dov ben Shmuel. Stanley Presser, in memory of his wife, Chayaleah Bas Zev HaKoyen. A week of learning by Judy and Michael Peretsky in memory of her mother, Razel Bas Yehuda Lev. And that's it today. Okay. So we'll just review for 10 seconds the bottom of Samech Tes Samech Beis. In the second version, in the first version of the Machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, it's where the Arusa and the Ores confessed to jumping the gun. And Rav said, I don't care, the baby's a mamzer. And Shmuel said, he's just a suffix mamzer, a shituki. In the second version, there is no confession. We have no idea who she slept with, and it may even not have been the Ores at all. He doesn't have a ladder. He doesn't know how to get through the window. And in that version, Rav says the kid's clearly a mamzer, and Shmuel says it's still just a shtuki. Maybe he found a ladder. Okay, now Rava in the first version gave a clarification. In this version, Rava gives a clarification also. Mistrabra Milsei de Rav. It's obvious or it's logical that Rav's position, the lo de kaimemine, is where we have pretty good evidence. There's no suspicion whatsoever that the man involved in getting her pregnant was her husband. Okay, we have pretty good evidence it was not her husband. Yeah, but that makes her husband. He's just not allowed to shtup her yet.
Yeah, but it's technically she's still.
Yeah, I mean, her race, okay, makes you happier. Okay, where we know it's not him, or at least we do not expect it to be him. Therefore, the baby is clearly a mamzer. The time in Alma. So the problem is she was probably sleeping with some Tom, Dick, or Harry. And Shmuel, nevertheless, says we want to be mamayet mamzerim in Israel. Avo, the kaimumine. But if there's even a hint that it could have been her ores, afal pi the kaimumi alma, even though she has a bad reputation that she sleeps around, Basre Didei Shadin and Lay, we assume it to have been him, the Ores, who fathered the child. I'll just say, Agavucha Orcha, the halacha is, anytime a married woman gives birth to a baby, unless there is ironclad proof that it was someone other than her husband, the baby is not a mamzer. And we would go so far as to say, if they're both blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jews from Sweden, and the baby comes out black, Nonetheless, we assume it's the father. Her husband is the father. All right. Omer Rava. Now, Rava is going to prove up this point. Omer Rava, Menah Aminale. Why do I say that? The Katani, because in our Mishnah, it said, if there's a Kohen who has intercourse not in marriage with a Bas Yisrael, Yolda Toichal. We make the assumption that the baby is the son of that Kohen and the woman can eat. Now, if we had a chashash, there are 100 million men and he's only one, so we would say the baby can't eat. So we see that we paskin that if he's confessed or if there is a strong suspicion, she's hanging out with him all the time, and then she gives birth, she can eat. Hey, dummy. So what are we talking about? If we have a strong suspicion that it's him, and below daima me alma, and there is no suspicion whatsoever that she had sex with somebody other than him, it would be obvious. You wouldn't have to make the Mishnah say that we assume the baby is his and she can eat truma als the baby. Okay, Elalav the Kaiman Nami Mi Alma. So obviously, since the Mishnah does mention the case, there is a suspicion that she's a promiscuous girl and may well have had sex with others. And nonetheless, we assume that it was his. Awesome. Now let's think about it. The high Isura of a high Isura. She's not allowed to sleep with this Kohen. She's not married to him. She's not, okay, he's a seducer or a rapist. And she's not allowed to sleep with anybody else either. Basre Dide Shadinan Le. Nevertheless, since he was caught, so to speak, climbing out of her window or whatever other grounds to suspect him may exist. There are rumors, whatever it is. So Hacha, where we do have an Arusa and an Erus, where they actually went through Erusin, okay, Lo Kol Shekain, how much more so is it more likely that the baby belongs to the Ores rather than to some Tom, Dick, and Harry? Okay.
Do we attempt to use the mind of in a situation?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do we discuss the problem to solve this problem sometimes that they can drink the mind of them?
She can't drink if she's only an Arusa. She has to be in the sewer to drink. She has to be in the sewer, otherwise not. And if he is guilty, in other words, if he did it, right. We go so far as to say, if he catches her sleeping with Schwartz, and he's schlepping her to Yerushalayim to go drink, and it's a cold night, they cuddle, and one thing leads to another. Now, but the point is, the husband has to be utterly blameless. If he's got a girlfriend, it won't work. If he fools around with his wife, not allowed to, it won't work. But anyway, by the time of the Mishnah, that was all theoretical anyway, because by bias Shani already, they didn't do it. All right, because otherwise there would be no women left. It says that promiscuity was so rampant that they couldn't do it. All right, next case, okay? The Mishnah went on to say, an Eved Paisel Mishum Bia. If a woman has sex with a Canaanite slave, she is now ineligible to eat truma. If she subsequently marries a Kohen, she wouldn't be able to eat truma. Or if she's a Bas Kohen, she wouldn't be able to go home to Tati to eat truma. My timer, what's the rationale? Amar Kra, the pasuk uses the following lashon: Ha'isha v'ladeha, the woman and her offspring, tihiyah, should belong to her master. This is talking about a slave girl. Okay, so we see that the person is a slave. Okay, so and therefore she would not be able. And if we had the case earlier where a Kohenes had a son, the son had sex with a slave girl bore a child. That child, even though it's got Kohen blood for sure, it's considered a slave and it would usher the bubby from eating truma. Mamzer Paisel Umaychel. A mamzer would disqualify a woman from eating truma if she's a Bas Kohen. Again, we have a mamzer is not permitted to marry a normal Jewish girl. He's got to marry another mamzer, a freed slave, a convert. There's a possible, maybe in any event. So if he has a bia with a normal Jewish girl, she would be usher to truma if she married a Kohen later, or if she's a Bas Kohen with the going home. On the other hand, a mamzer Kohen would allow his mother to eat truma. So that's why it says mamzer posel umaychel. He does because he is a Kohen. And he therefore, he's a halal, but he qualifies his mother to eat truma. Tana Rabbanan, we have a new case. Zera Einla, a widow or a divorcee whose father is a Kohen. And now she leaves the marriage either through divorce or she's a widowed. She returns to her father, she may eat truma. Ainli Elazera. So maybe that only means she has living children. We'll call it first door. And Mrs. Schwartz, before she got married, her name was Sylvia Cohen. She has a baby, girl or boy. She may eat she may not eat truma when she goes home. But what if that kid dies? However, that kid had a kid before it died. So now she has a grandchild or a great grandchild or a great, 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 great grandchild. Doesn't matter. That's considered zera of hers, and she can't go home to Tati. But from the pasuk, it would only say the first door. Zera minayin. How would I know even her grandchild or great grandchild, etc.? Talmud Lomar. Zera ein lo mikol makom. The vav in zera includes any descendant of hers.
I doubt if she had a great great grandchild, she's going home to Tati.
Well, they were long lived.
Okay, whatever it is.
All right.
It's an analogy.
Talmud Lime. Okay, we said that already. Now, no matter how far in the chain it is, Ainli Elazera kosher. So I might assume we're talking only about legitimate offspring. What about, okay, Zera Puzzle Menayan? How would I know? Even if she had an illegitimate child or an illegitimate grandchild, as in the case we had earlier, that she still can't go home to Tati. Talmud Lomar, Zera ein lo. There is no unto her. And And if you look at the word ein, it could have been written without the yud. The fact that the yud is in there comes to be marba somebody, that would even be illegitimate offspring, even a mamzer. Okay? Now, ayin Allah, the pasuk then says, check into her to see if there are any descendants anywhere, right, or estranged family members before you would allow her to eat truma. Okay, next question. Ha apikte lezera zera, but the yud in the ayin we already use. In other words, you want to tell me we actually have to check into it, but we use that yud up already to talk about grandchildren. How can you use it again for illegitimate grandchildren or children? Zera zera lo itzerich kra. We didn't really have to have a pasuk at all for grandchildren. We've seen this in the Gemara a few times before already. B'nei banim harei kebanim. That grandchildren are like your children. So we could have applied that principle. We didn't need to use the yud. So we got the yud hanging there ready to be for illegitimate children. Okay? Ki itzrich kra, when do you need the yud? Lizera puzzle, to only talk about illegitimate children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren. Amalei Rish Lakish Rav Yochanan. Rav Lakish asked Rav Yochanan, come on, who do we paskin like? I mean, where do we get the right to do this drasha? Karebi Akiva. The Omer Yesh Mamzer Mechayve Lavin. Because he says that even a lav marriage, a Kohen gadol to a divorcee, or a widow, a Stama Kohen to a divorcee. According to Rabbi Akiva, now we say that marriage is toifes, and the kids are legitimate children. They're not mamzerim. That's how the Rabbanan paskin. But Rabbi Akiva says any lav relationship is not tofes, and the effective result of that is that the kids are mamzerim. And okay, so that's Rabbi Akiva, and yet the Mishnah called this kid a mamzer, so it has to be Rabbi Akiva. And then the Gemara says, no, it could even be the Rabbanan. Afilu tema Rabbanan. You could even say it's the Rabbanan. Because the rabbis acknowledge that having sex with a non-Jew is only a lav, but or with a slave. It's only a lav. You don't get kares for that. But nonetheless, such a, quote, marriage, unquote, would not be a valid marriage. And it would not be taifes, and therefore the kid's a mamzer. Agavurcha, all the mixed marriages, that's a real problem. All right. Dechi Asa Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi showed up in Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi Mishum Rabbeinu. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi said in the name of Rebbe, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Ayved Kachavim v'Eved haba al Bas Yisrael havlad mamzer. In those cases, the child is a mamzer. Nevertheless, okay, so and Rebbe was the final authority, so he obviously is paskening in this instance like Rebbe Akiva. Okay, next, the end of the Mishnah, Kohen Gadol Pa'am Shapoisel, sometimes he could disqualify a woman, his blood relative woman, from eating truma, and we already talked about the bubby who would be disqualified. So the Gemara tells over a little bubba maisa, mamish a bubba maisa, Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis teach, Hareini kaparas ben bati kuza. A woman says, I will be the atonement for my daughter's son, Ben Bati. Akuzi here is a use, it means little container, but here it is a euphemism for mamzer, because Shemai Chaleni B'Truma, because that one allows me to eat Truma. Ani Kaparas Ben Bati Kada, but I would not be able to atone for my grandson, the great, huge container, meaning the Kohen Gadol, Shaposlaini Mina Truma, who because of our family circumstance, would not allow me to eat truma. Okay, little humor on the part of the Chachamim. Hadran Allah Almana. Now, the next Mishnah, we sort of have the whole cup, but we're going to get a long list of people here. And Orel, that means now we're talking about Kohanim here. An Orel, an uncircumcised Kohen, V'chol ha'tameim, or any Kohen who's tamei meis, lo yachlu b'truma, he cannot eat truma. Nashehem v'avdehen yachlu b'truma, but that does not disqualify his spouse or his slaves. Okay, and we'll see why later. Petsua daka ukrus shifcha, a person who has damaged testicles, or at least one, or a person whose penis has the atara or further down removed. Okay, he had cancer, or he was in an accident, and part or all of his penis was removed. He cannot eat truma. Hain of dehen yachlu. There only his slaves can eat. V'neshehem lo yochelu, but his wives cannot eat, and that will be qualified. If they have or attempt sex after the injury. If she moves to another bedroom, she can still eat truma. Okay. Neshehem lo yachli, wives cannot eat truma. Im lo yoda'a, if he did not know her, in quotes, meaning there was no sexual contact after the injury. After he became a petzuadaka, a kruz shifcha or a kruz shifcha, hare elu yochelu. In then circumstances, the wives can eat truma. Now, obviously, we have to now define petzuadaka and kruz shifcha. Ezahu petzuadaka, what's a person with busted balls? Kol sheniftza'u habeitzim shaloi, anyone whose beitzim are damaged, afilu achas mehem, even if it's only one testicle. Okay? A kruz shifcha, what's the definition of a kruz shifcha? Kol shenikras hagid, anyone whose penis is severed. However, Im nishtayer me atara, if the corona, the large bulb at the end of the penis, is afilu kachut hasa'ara, even if there's just a hair's breadth of it left, okay, then he's kosher, he's a perfectly valid person, and he can have beer with his wife. So it has to be a complete excision of the corona or further down. Okay, now we have to ask, how do we know about the orel, right? Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Minayin the Orel she'eino echel b'truma. How do we know that a uncircumcised Kohen cannot eat truma? Ne'emar toishav v'sachir v'pesach. The words, toshav and sachir, usually they mean non-Jewish resident is a toshav, and a sachir means a hired hand. But we're going to use those words differently here, are mentioned when we talk about Korban Pesach. Ne'emar, it says toshev v'sachir betruma, and those two words are also used in psukim describing who may and who may not eat truma. Ma toshev v'sachir amr b'pesach arel aser b'y. In the same list that toshev and seicher appear. By Pesach, it says a person who's not been circumcised and Orel may not eat the Korban Pesach. Af Toshev Sachir Ha'amur B'Truma Orel Asur Lo. So they make a Gezerah Shava, and they say that when it comes, even though the word Orel is not written by Truma, we schlep it over because of the Gezerah Shava. Rabbi Akiva Omer Einu Tzorich. You don't even need the Gezerah Shava. Harehu Omer, because in the psukim about Truma and Kodshim, the word Ish is said twice. Ish, Ish. And therefore he says a man, and then you have to add a fully normal man, meaning a man who's circumcised. L'rabas Orel, to add Orel to the list of people who cannot eat Truma. Omer Mar, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer said, Ne'emar Toshev v'Sachir b'Pesach, the words Toshev and Sachir appear by Pesach. The Omer Toshev v'Sachir b'Truma, and the same words appear by Truma. Ma Toshev v'Sachir Omer b'Pesach Arel Aser Boi. This is restating the same idea that they're not able to eat Truma if they're uncircumcised. Pesach if they're uncircumcised. Av Toshev v'Sachir Omer b'Truma Orel Asur Lo. Bo, same din by the Truma he can't eat. Now Mufne, you have to have a Gezerah Shava has to have words that are not needed for the simple pshat of the pasuk. They have to be mufne. The ilav mufne, if the words are not mufne, at least in one of the psukim, ikil mifrach, you wouldn't be able to do Gezerah Shava. You could say, yeah, but the words are needed for the pure pshat. Ma lepesach shechein chayavin olav mishum pigul noser and tameh. We know that people are chayav achatas if they eat pigul or noser leftover korban pesach or tameh. Either they or the korban meat is tameh. Okay, but with regard to truma, there are no such lavin. So therefore, you could say only by Pesach, because Pesach is more chomer. It has these lavin attached. So maybe you can't do this gezerah shava. Lav afune mufne. It's not really. So therefore, you have to say that it is extra, and you can do the gezerah shava. Hi, Mufne. So now the Gemara wants to know, yeah, but you have these two psukim. And there's a machlokes whether you need Mufne in both or not, but we're holding here, you only need it once. So which is the one that's superfluous? The Truma. If you say Toshev and Sachir are extra in the Parsha of Truma, Matzrech Tzrichi. No, you have to use it to learn something else. The Sanya, here and now we're going to define the words. We know that an Eved Ivri has, depending on the, usually he's sentenced to being an Eved Ivri because he owes money or he's committed some kind of a crime. And he could become an Eved Ivri for a time frame up to, but not longer than 6 years. We know that. We also know that you have to be treated very nicely when you're an Eved Ivri. And a guy who's really down on his luck could say, gee, I'll never have it this good ever again in my life. I want to stick around. In which case, the owner nails his ear to the door and he stays forever, which means until Yovel. We know all of that. So Toshuv Zeh Kanu Kinyan Olam. In our pasuk by Truma, the word Tashuv is used to refer to a nailed slave who wants to hang out. Okay, he's called a nirtza. And we're telling you that since he's Jewish and he really owns himself, he's only an indentured servant. He only has a contractual obligation to work for his master forever. He cannot eat truma. He's not like an Eved Kenani who's owned by the master, physically really owned. So in order to keep the thing going, Sachir Zekoni Kinyan Shanim. That would be a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 year slave who also is not really owned by the master, and therefore no Eved Ivri can eat truma if his master is a Kohen, and that's what those words are used for in the pasuk by truma. So they are not mufne. Va'omer tashev v'al omer sachir. So the Gemara says, well, let's try leaving one of the words out. Let's say one of the words is mufne. Ani omer kanu kinyan olam eina oichel kanu kinyan shanim lo kol shekain. If I say a permanent Jewish slave can't eat truma by his master, the Kohen, how much more so a temporary Jewish slave should not be able to eat truma by his master. So Gemara says that's not such a good thing. Elu Cain, if the only Toshuv was in the pasuk, Haisa Aimer, I could have argued Toshuv Zekoni Kinyan Shonim. How do I know? What only with the existence of both words, and the word Sachir implicitly is less permanent than Tashuv, which also means resident. So if both words are there, I can apply these two to the two kinds of slaves. But if only Tashuv is written, I might say that means a temporary slave. He moved in for a while. Of a Kinyan Olam, but maybe a permanent Jewish slave gives up enough of his own mastery over himself that Eichel, that he should be called part of the family and eat truma. And similarly, Bo Sachir Velimed al Toshev. So the word Sachir comes and helps us define the word Toshev. The Afalpi Shekone Kinyan Olam, even though the nailed slave is there forever, so to speak, Ein Eichel, he also may not eat Truma. So we have to re-examine. We have to go back and look at Pesach and say that's where the words are extra. Ella de Pesach Mufne. The words are extra in Pesach. Hi, Tosha v'sacher diksiv Rachmana b'Pesach. There, my Ninahu. What are those words referring to? Einema Tosha v'sacher mamish. If we're saying they're talking about Jewish slaves, mishum tahavi le Tosha v'sacher after le mi Pesach. Where would you get the notion that a Jew, just because he's an indentured slave, shouldn't have a Seder? He owns himself. He's an Eved to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Of course he has to have a Seder. Ha kaimalan gabi truma. But we are said over by truma de la ochil that they cannot eat. So alma lo kani le rabbe. So we see from here, we learn that the owner, quote unquote, of a Jewish slave doesn't really own him. He just has a contract for his labor, and he can eat Pesach on his own account. Hachanami lo kani le rabbe. So over by Truma, the owner doesn't own him, and therefore it's obvious he wouldn't eat Truma. So Toshev Socher may not eat by Pesach could not mean a Jewish slave, because he does eat. So obviously then the words don't fit the plain meaning of the pasuk as we've defined those words. Elul afune, so they are extra words. Okay. Va'akati mufna mitzad echad. But still, I said it earlier that there is a machlokes whether you need two free one in each pasuk, or two free, only one free, or we're going to have a third possibility, two free and one pasuk. Okay. Shema'in and le Rav Eliezer the Omar, and we learned elsewhere that Rav Eliezer says mufna mitzad echad. When a gezerah shava and only one side is clearly free, lamadin, you could derive a gezerah shava. However, it is also not so rock solid. It can be challenged. Mashivin. It could be challenged or objected to. But since we said we don't really need it, and there are two extra words, Shadei Chad Alamed, V'Shadei Chad Amalamed. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a little trick, and we have two extra words. We'll call that like double, and therefore it's as if there are two. Was that clear on that? No, because it doesn't really make sense, but that's what they say. Okay, so Ima Pesach Einen Asur Bo. So if we're asking a new question. Ima Pesach Einen Asur Bo. With regard to the Korban Pesach, if Rahmana Litzlan, a father, mother, sister, brother, son, daughter, wife passes away on the 14th of Nisan, that person cannot do a Korban Pesach because he's an onen. Af truma onen asur bo. So are we going to, this is a question, are we going to say that we take the same din and apply it to truma and say an onen, a Kohen who's an onen? Now let's say he's the Kohen Gadol and he's an onen, but he's not really an onen because he can't be matame, and it gets tricky. But do we say a Kohen onen can't eat truma? Omar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, the son of Chanina, Omar Kra, there is a pasuk that says, Zar v'chol, okay, an outsider. Zar, and then but the pasuk uses an extra word, v'chol zar. Any outsider may not eat truma. Now that's unnecessary. Maybe the whole pasuk is unnecessary, the whole phrase is unnecessary, but at least v'chol zar is unnecessary. Zarus amrei lacha v'lo aninos. So that would mean that only a non-Kohen, but it might not say anything about an onen. Ema v'lo arelos. Maybe it only means the zar here, strange, means a strange Kohen, an uncircumcised Kohen. So we said, no, we already have Haksiv Toshe V'Sachir. Those words already taught us that not only a uncircumcised Kohen, but also a non-Kohen, even if he's part of the household, can't eat truma. So Marisi, so how do you have to, what do you see in these cases? Mistabra arelus havale leribui. Obviously, uncircumcised is part of this riboy. So an uncircumcised Kohen is considered a czar to that extent. Shechen, and then there's maybe this mnemonic is in, maybe if Rashi has it, but the most Gemaras do not. And mechuser maisa. What is the definition of an uncircumcised person? He's mechuser maisa. He's missing a positive act of removing his foreskin. Umaisa begufo. And that act is on his body. It's surgery on his person. And if he never is circumcised without a medical reason not to be, his einish is kares. He's punished with kares. V'yishnu lifnei hadibur, and furthermore, circumcision, the mitzvah of circumcision was given to the Jews in Egypt before that first Korban Pesach, where they painted the doors and stuff with blood, and that's long before Har Sinai. Okay, umilas zacharus va'avadav ma'akeves, and not only that, but if a person has a child who's uncircumcised, older than 8 days, or a male Eved Kenani who is uncircumcised, because we learned earlier, there is an opinion he gets a whole year to have the surgery, he may not eat a Korban Pesach. So we see all these chumras by Pesach. Adarabba. Aninas have a Layla Riboy. Maybe we should not put the uncircumcised as the Riboy. Maybe we should put the person who has an immediate death in the family and is Osek B'mitzvah of dealing with the dead person. So why, but we just said all these chumras or all these stringencies by Mila, by Pesach. So where are there equivalent stringencies by over here? Shechen yishna v'chol sha'ah. Bris is a one-time deal. You can't repeat your bris. There's nothing there to cut off. Bris is a one-time deal. V'noheges ba'anashim, I'm sorry, shechen yishna v'chol sha'ah. But aninus, it's possible at any moment. And it can happen multiple times in a lifetime. You can lose 2 parents individually. You can lose your older brother, your older sister. Sometimes your wife predeceases you. Even Rahman al-Islam children die. So aninus can happen many times and at any time. V'noheges b'nashim v'nashim. Furthermore, bris is only, mila is only applicable to males. Aninus happens to women also. V'ein biyado l'sakein es atzmo. If you have missing a bris, you can go to a moil and you can cover it by doing it. But you can't undo aninus except waiting for the day to end and burying the person. So we see chumras by aninus. Hachnafshan. So we see that actually, when you go through the math, so to speak, aninus has more frequency and more chumras, so to speak, than does uncircumcision. Okay. Rava Omer below hanachnafshan. You don't even have to go through and do the math, so to speak. Nami lo matzis amart. you still can't say that the Gezerah Shava is only to prohibit an onen from eating truma. Shabakinan arelus dixiv gufei de Pesach, because it makes more sense to leave uncircumcised associated with not eating the Korban Pesach, because the Parsha of the Korban Pesach contains the psukim saying that an uncircumcised person can't eat it. Okay, v'alfinin aninas me Pesach. And if you're going to learn that an onen can't eat truma, it's only a derivative from from learning about Pesach. The Pesach gufe b'maiser gamrinon, and the whole notion of not eating a korban Pesach when you're an onen, we learn from a Kal V'chomer by Meiser Sheni. Okay, Ima Pesach Mila Sechara V'Avadav Ma'akeves. So if we say the Gezerah Shava from Pesach to Truma, we would argue just as an uncircumcised person or uncircumcised males in his family circle preclude him from eating Pesach, af Truma, Mila Secharav Yavadav Ma'akeves. You would have to argue that with Truma too, if you have an uncircumcised slave or an uncircumcised child, that person the owner or the tati shouldn't be able to eat truma, and we don't say that. Omer Kro, the pasuk says by Pesach, O Malta Iso, O Yochel Bo, Oz Yochel Bo. Oh, you have to circumcise them. You got it, it's the 13th of Nisan. Circumcise them so you can have a Korban Pesach tomorrow. Mila secharav avadav ma'akeves bo me'echel b'Pesach, because the exclusion is stipulated explicitly by Pesach. V'ein mila secharav avadav ma'akeves b'truma. There is no such restriction when it comes to truma. And we just said earlier that if he's uncircumcised, he can't eat truma, but his family and slaves can. So it's restricted only to him. If that's the case, Ema v'chol orel lo yachol bo. The pasuk says an uncircumcised person may not eat bo, it, meaning the Korban Pesach. Bo ein ochel. Only the Korban Pesach. The word bo is singular. So therefore, maybe an orel can eat truma. Aval oichel hu b'truma. So that's where we would be at this point on the word bo. Haksiv toshev v'sachir, but we have the extra words toshev v'sachir, which make the gezerah shava. We proved that there is free words, and therefore the truma learns from Pesach, and a person uncircumcised cannot eat truma. Omara isi. So at the bottom line, what's the bottom line? Mistabra arelus de gufe have leila riboy. It's logical that an individual's lack of a bris is in the prohibition, shechein maisa gufo, because he can fix it by having surgery on his body. The enish kares, and the punishment for not doing so is kares. Adarabba, the Gemara says. Maybe it's the other way around. Milas charav yavadav have leriboy. Maybe because non-circumcision of children or slaves is what you have to do. Shechein yishna v'chol sha'ah. We said that aninas could happen at any moment. The lack of a circumcision is a continuing avera. What that means is, up until a child is 13, it's the father's responsibility. from the 13 and a day till the moment of his death, every fraction of a second is a new Aveira. So it's a continuing Aveira, and therefore it happens more than any other Aveira. Hanach Nafshan. So you see now that the math of non-circumcision, it's 1,000,000. And the Ninus is 6 or 7 or 12 times in a lifetime max. So therefore we should do it the other way around and say that that it doesn't work to exclude Truma. So Vivoy Sema, you want to learn it a different way, below Nafshan, without going through this math game. Nami la matzis amad. You still can't do the Gezerah Shava without resorting to the math game. The Gezerah Shava still isn't terrific when it comes to not eating Truma. Mi the arelus, the gufe lo ma'akeves, but mi akavaba, because you would not be able to have a case where my own non-circumcision would allow me to eat, but a family member's non-circumcision would prohibit me from eating. That wouldn't make sense. Hashta the Amar bo, but we use the word bo to mean just the Pesach. Kol ben necher lo ochel bo lomali. So what do I need the rest of the pasuk for? Kol necher, ben necher, any estranged person. Normally the word necher means non-Jew, but when it comes to the Korban Pesach, someone who is an apostate or someone who denies God's existence, or someone who says, I'm not really sure, he is precluded from participating in a Korban Pesach. Okay, so now we have a new limud. Anyone who is estranged, even to the extent of saying, I'm not sure, is forbidden to eat Pesach. Okay? So we'll just finish a couple of lines. Hamores das poseles, someone who has doubts in his mind is forbidden to eat Korban Pesach. The ein hamartas das poseles b'maiser, but that same fellow could participate and eat Meiser Sheni, and we'll go into this further on the morrow in the Yirtzeh Hashem. All right. What?
If the Kohen's wife has a son, then he loses his shmekel, then she can eat because of the son.
What? No, he's still alive.
He's still alive.
He cannot eat, she can.
What if I wish I put this thing?
What?
The,
Leave it right here. That's where.
nobody's gonna take it.
No, that's where they are. They've been sitting here since we started.
Okay.
The reason you said shmekel is because part of it's missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the rhymes of peckle.
No, it's a dominion. Dominion.
Okay, whatever.
So because it was reduced.
You could think of
What?
He said, what other word could you use?
Use penis.
The word schmuck.
You could use that. What shmekel is the diminutive of schmuck. Except everybody I know who's a schmuck is a big schmuck.
Unfortunately.
Nobody's a schmekel.
Hey, good luck.
Okie dokie, at 12:30.
Yeah.
Very good. Looking forward. All right. This thing on.